So next, what we need to do is we need to spend a little bit of time reviewing how we multiply radicals. You will remember that we just practiced simplifying radicals, and as you multiply them, you really can simplify them either before you multiply them or after, but a couple of the other rules about multiplication are really important. And if we talk about this kind of in math language, what we would say is if we have the square root of A times the square root of B, and that is going to equal the square root of A times B. Okay, and what that really means is if we're multiplying radicals, we kind of just multiply them, right? And anything that is inside the square root sign can be multiplied with other things inside a square root sign. But things outside of the square root are going to multiply with other things outside of the square root. And if that sounds a little bit confusing, we're going to take a look at some examples of that. So, for example, in this first one, we have the square root of 10 times the square root of 2. To multiply those two, we simply look at the square root of 10 times 2. Now, if we continued multiplying, we know that that would get us to 20, right? But remember that we really want to look at what are those factors in order to simplify it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a moment and rewrite that 10 really as 2 times 5 times that other 2, right? Times this 2. This is 10 times 2. We're looking for any place that we have 2 of that same number. And so here's 2 2s. I'm going to kind of circle them. That means they're going to come out. Remember, only 1 comes out, and that 5 will stay right inside. Okay, so the square root of 10 times the square root of 2, really the square root of 20, and that simplifies to this. Always make sure that your answers are simplified. This next one we're going to look at square root of 6 times the square root of 32, which really is the square root of 6 times 32. Of course, you could go and figure out what 6 times 32 was, but if we want to kind of save ourselves some time, we just want to find the factors. We will know that they're all multiplied together. So 6 is 2 times 3, and 32 is 16 times 2. What I really want to do, I guess, is take that 32 and find that factor tree of it. Again, remember that if you don't need to do this, that's okay. But I would encourage you to make sure that you're finding all of those factors of 32. So here we stop at a 2. 16 is 2 and 8. 8 is 2 and 4. 4 is 2 and 2. We're down at the bottom. So what we really want is that 2 times 3 times, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 2s. Squeeze it in there, right? That's all the square root. So now we have 6 times 32. It just looks a little bit different. Circle any place that we have 2 of that same number. There's another 2 kind of in a funny spot here. I'll try to connect them. So what that means is each one of these circles should come to the outside. So we'll have 2 times 2 times 2, right? There's 3 circles, but I still have a 3 inside. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times the square root of 3 would be our final answer. Okay, so not only are we multiplying and need to remember that rule, but then we need to also follow that up by simplifying what your answer is. Okay, let's look at a couple of more. This first one says the square root of 5 squared. Now, I want you to remember that that squared really means it's square root of 5 times the square root of 5. And our multiplication rule says that if we're multiplying two square roots, we really just multiply them under that square root. So we're going to have 5 times 5. Now notice what happens. I have 2 of that exact same number. So as I circle it and take a look at what it should equal, anything that's circled comes out of the square root. But in this case, there's nothing left inside. So our answer is just 5. The next one gets a little tricky because you'll notice that now we have numbers inside the square root and also outside of the square root. It's really important to remember that it's kind of like a house. People inside the house can talk to people inside the house. People outside the house can talk to people outside the house, right? Or you might, in this day and age, we might think of those square root signs as someone in quarantine. So someone in quarantine in the house can only talk to someone in quarantine in that same house, right? Maybe that works and people outside can talk to the people outside. So what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite this as 2 times 3. Put it all under one square root. So we have 150 times 15. Now, what I would encourage you to do is, again, find a way that works best for you to kind of find those factors of those numbers. Some of you will try to divide by one of these perfect squares. Some of you might kind of in your head think about the factors. If you find that you tend to get some kind of mistakes in these or you forget some of those factors, I really encourage you to use that factor tree to think through it. So if I start with 150, well, I can kind of think to break that into 10 and 15. You may have broken it into something else, and that's okay, right? 10 becomes a 2 and a 5. We're not going to break either one of those down any further. And 15 becomes a 3 and a 5. So now if I rewrite this, 2 times 3 is 6. I can rewrite that 150 as 2 times 3 times 5 times 5. Try to squeeze it in here. 15 I know is 3 times 5. Now what I want to do is I want to find any of those kind of ones that have a partner. So here I have 2 5s. I'm going to make one of those kind of funny looking circles to connect these 3s. This 2 does not have a partner. And while some of the 5s have a partner, this one is left all by himself, right? So now we're going to take any that have a partner and bring them to the outside. Don't forget that number that was already out there. So now it will be 6 times 3 times 5. Double check that you got both of the circles. Times the square root of 2 times 5. We don't want to leave our answer like this. We want to multiply it back out. So 6 times, I'm going to do 6 times 5 first. 6 times 5 is 30. Times 3 is 90. Put those things together inside. So 2 times 5 is 10. So here is our final answer. Remember, there's several steps. Multiply outside and multiply inside. Find those factors so that we can simplify. And then multiply everything together. Outside multiplied with outside, inside multiplied with inside. This is going to be the last example that we look at today. So this one is getting a little bit harder yet. It has some bigger numbers. So what we want to start with by doing is multiplying the things that are on the outside and taking a look at multiplying those things inside the square roots, right? This at its most basic level is what we do when we're multiplying those radicals. But now I need to actually multiply and simplify these. Now, again, I would encourage you to do a factor tree, but the most important part is to find all of those factors, right? And you may think of it a different way, but make sure that you're finding those factors. So I know that a 96 could be 3 and 32. First thing that jumped out to me, since this is an even number, I know that I can divide it by 2. And this is going to be 4 and 4. Now I want you to notice something. I'm not going to go further than those 2 4s, but I'm going to just note that it's kind of because I found 2 of them, right? And we know that that will do something unique inside that square root. So what I'm going to do, this will be 12 times, let's write those factors of 96. We have 4 times 4 times 3 times 2, and then 20 is 2 times 2 times 5. So I'm going to circle any partners that I see in here and then bring those to the outside. So this will be 12 times 4 times 2. Inside, I still have a 3 and a 2 and a 5. Now, I want you to notice these numbers that are left inside here, right? Once we multiply those out, we're going to get 30 left inside the square root. And we just want to make sure we can't simplify it anymore. And I want you to notice that your numbers, when you have it written like this, should all be prime numbers. We cannot split any of those apart anymore, and none of them have doubles. So I know that I have simplified as much as possible. Okay, so now we just need to multiply and get this back to a number. So 12 times 4 is 48. And 48 times 2 is 96. And then inside I have 3 times 2, which is 6. And 6 times 5, which is 30. So when I start with these two things to multiply, I'm going to end up right here. Okay, make sure that you're multiplying outside numbers with outside and inside the radical with inside the radical. Make sure you're finding all those factors. Then make sure you're bringing any with doubles outside and putting them all back together to get your final answer. And that is how we are multiplying radicals.